Today, Labour wins big after a dramatic election night in the UK. Israel approves thousands of new settlement homes in the occupied West Bank, and Hurricane Beryl batters the Caribbean. From TLDR News, this is your daily briefing for Friday the 5th of July, 2024. Yesterday, voters here in the UK went to the polls to elect a new government. As the polls closed at 10 p.m, the major broadcasters were able to reveal what they'd been working on all day: long-awaited exit poll. Now, as exit polls come, this was on the relatively shocking side for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it was predicted that Reform UK would win 13 seats, significantly more than the majority of pollsters were predicting. Considering how new the Reform Party is, this was seen as a really impressive feat. However, as the night went on, there were signs that perhaps this figure might not be all that accurate. In the end, Reform ended with 4 seats. It's worth pointing out that we're recording this at 8:40 a.m, and there are still 6 seats left to declare. The Conservatives were predicted to win 131 seats, which again was higher than pollsters had predicted in the weeks running up to the election. This figure turned out to be fairly accurate, with the most recent number being 119 seats. Labour were slightly down on the pre-election night polls, with the exit poll predicting that they would win 410 seats. In the end, the results through the night showed that Labour were doing slightly better than expected, and ended up again at the time of writing with 410 seats, the same as the exit poll saying, but there are still a couple left to declare. This is ever so slightly below the Labour seat record of 418 set in 1997 under Tony Blair. However, considering that Labour won its lowest seat share since 1935 back at the last election in 2019, their landslide victory yesterday was a really significant achievement. Anyway, through the night we saw a number of so-called Portillo moments. This is the phrase given to senior members of a party that unexpectedly lose their seat. The first of these happened just before the 2 a.m. mark, when Education Secretary Gillian Keegan lost her seat. The next big result was at 3:10 a.m, when Grant Shapps, the incumbent Defence Secretary, lost his Welwyn Hatfield constituency to Labour. The next big event came only 20 minutes later, when the Shadow Paymaster General and relatively big Labour figure, Jonathan Ashworth, lost his seat to a pro-Palestine independence candidate, the first of a small handful of such candidates who went on to win seats. Right as this was happening, over in Clacton, Reform leader Nigel Farage, for the first time ever, won a seat in Parliament, having been defeated on 7 previous occasions. Around this time too, we saw one of the most shocking results of the night, when ex-Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn, who stood as an independent in Islington North, retained his seat with a strong majority, defeating the challenger selected by his former party. Labour's Shadow Culture Secretary Thangam Debonair lost her Bristol seat to the Green Party's co-leader Carla Denyer, with the Greens going on to win a total of 4 seats. A really great night for them. At 4:30 a.m, we saw potential leadership contender Penny Mordaunt also lose her seat to Labour by a margin of almost 2,000 votes. At almost exactly the same moment, we saw Conservative ex-Deputy Prime Minister Theresa Coffey lose her seat too. Later, at about 4:45 a.m, both Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt, the Prime Minister and Chancellor respectively, retained their seats. While it was pretty certain that Sunak was going to retain his seat, this was far less certain for Hunt. It remains the case that no Prime Minister or Chancellor in history have ever lost their seat in a general election. To cap the night off, we saw former Prime Minister Liz Truss lose her seat at around 7 a.m. All in all, at the time of writing, a record 12 Conservative cabinet ministers have lost their seats, alongside a large number of high-profile Conservative Party figures. Anyway, that's what happened overnight. If you want our full analysis of the result, then check out the video, and the other upcoming videos, over on the TLDR News UK channel. Genuinely, I've been up since 10 a.m. yesterday doing work on all this. It's been nearly 24 hours of all of this, so genuinely please just check out the UK video. We've done a lot of analysis there, and it's probably a good addition to what we've done in this video. Anyway, let's move on with the daily briefing. There's more on the way, but remember to subscribe and ring the bell for more daily briefing on Tuesday. Plus, if you want to support the channel like Moobet, then consider joining the new TLDR membership program for just $1.99. The Israeli government has approved a plan to build almost 5,300 new homes in the occupied West Bank, according to a settlement monitoring group, making a further acceleration of Israeli efforts to expand settlements in the occupied Palestinian territory. Since October the 7th, violence has surged in the West Bank in parallel to the war in Gaza, and the latest settlement expansion plan, led by far-right Finance Minister Bezalel Smotrich, will further stoke tensions in both Gaza and the West Bank. Meanwhile, the Israeli government has dispatched negotiators to resume Gaza ceasefire talks after Hamas on Wednesday provided its response to a US-backed phased ceasefire proposal. Hamas said it had sent its response to Egypt and Qatar, the countries mediating the negotiations. The US has called it a breakthrough, establishing a framework for a possible ceasefire and hostage release deal. However, there will still be tough negotiations over its implementation. Parts of Mexico are on red alert as Hurricane Beryl has gathered strength and prepares to make landfall on the Mexican coast, with the tourist town of Tulum in its path. The hurricane has already left a trail of devastation and at least 10 people dead across the Caribbean. It passed along Jamaica's southern coast, leaving hundreds of thousands of homes without power, closing airports and forcing almost 1,000 people into government-designated shelters. Prior to hitting Jamaica, Hurricane Beryl had already severely damaged parts of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, with 2 islands in the country suffering the destruction of more than 90% of buildings. In Grenada, the Prime Minister described, quote, Armageddon-like conditions in parts of the country and confirmed 3 deaths, while in Venezuela, 3 people were reported to have died and 8,000 homes were damaged. With the hurricane heading to Mexico, the country's civil protection agency has urged tourists in Cancun and Tulum to shelter in hotel basements. The hurricane is the first of the 2024 Atlantic season, and at its peak earlier this week, Beryl was the earliest Category 5 storm on record. Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro has been indicted by police for alleged money laundering and criminal association in relation to undeclared diamonds gifted by Saudi Arabia, according to reports. The jewellery and luxury watches, worth some $3.2 million, had been given to Bolsonaro by the Saudi government. Some of the jewellery was discovered by customs officers in the bag of a government aide travelling back into Brazil from Saudi Arabia, and an investigation was launched. Bolsonaro is accused of trying to sneak the high-value gifts into the country without declaring them, and getting others to help him sell some pieces in the United States. It's the second indictment against Bolsonaro since leaving office, with the first coming in May when the ex-president was accused of falsifying his COVID-19 vaccination certificate. He also faces a range of other legal difficulties. For example, he was last year banned from running for office until 2030 for abuse of power and making unfounded claims about Brazil's election system. He's also at the centre of an investigation into a potential coup attempt, surrounding January the 8th, 2023 attacks on government buildings. Bolsonaro's bizarrest legal trouble, though, is that he's under investigation for allegedly harassing a whale while riding a personal watercraft off the coast of Sao Paulo. And finally, in some uplifting news, Ukraine has received nearly 6,000 solar panels from the European Commission to power hospitals across the country in dire need of power to operate properly. Ukraine's energy infrastructure has been a direct target by Russian strikes. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has said that Russia has damaged or destroyed more than half of Ukraine's power generation. These attacks have led to daily and often lengthy power outages across the country. Hospitals have been unable to provide uninterrupted medical care to patients. According to the Ukrainian Energy Ministry, however, the donated panels will provide a total capacity of around 2 megawatts of electricity in 5 different oblasts. The equipment needed to install these panels will be funded through the International Ukraine Energy Support Fund.
If you want to learn more, then check out Too Long, our 60-page, high-quality magazine full of TLDR's very best journalism. This issue is focused on the UK election, diving deep into the campaign, the results, and how the winners plan to fix Britain. It's more than just Britain, though, with stories including the European parliamentary elections, the countries likely to join the EU next, the latest from Gaza, the rise of Milei, and, of course, the US election. Now, we've decided to make the magazine for 2 reasons. Firstly, it allows our journalists to write in more detail, diving deeper and ignoring algorithmic restrictions to produce the best work we can. And secondly, it's a good way for you to support TLDR and will help us to produce free YouTube videos as long as we can. If you're interested, then you can pick up a copy from our website, where we're selling 2 editions of the magazine. Firstly, there's the standard edition, and then there's the premium edition, which gets your name printed in the thank you section of the magazine, access to our behind the scenes podcast, and exclusive access to our election night live stream, where we'll be reacting to the exit poll with you as it happens. Oh, and by the way, we're going to be making an issue of Too Long every 4 months. So if you want to ensure that you never miss an issue, then you can subscribe, which gets you a 25% discount. If you have more questions, there's a full Q&A linked in the description, where you'll also find a link to our store. And while you're there, make sure you use the code ELECTIONWEEK to get an additional £2 off any purchase. Thanks so much for hearing me out, and if you are interested, please do pick up a copy, as it's a great way to support our journalism and help us to continue making free YouTube videos as long as we can.